Your arrival here is not random. This is not the algorithm's doing. This is synchronicity. This means you have already survived something that devastates the vast majority of people. You passed a test, not of the body, but of the soul. You walked through the fire that Carl Jung called the Nigredo, the absolute darkness, the necessary fragmentation that must occur before true gold can be created. Most who enter this void do not return intact. They shatter. They numb themselves. They retreat into the safety of illusion. But you are still here. I am not talking about a difficult month or a series of bad luck. I am talking about the period when your life collapsed, when the ground beneath you melted away. I am talking about the time when everything you identified as yourself fell apart simultaneously.
Your career, your relationships, your faith, your understanding of how the world works, all of it turned to dust in your hands. This was not a gradual decline. This was demolition. This was the complete inward collapse of your life's architecture. And perhaps the most terrifying aspect was its silence. You could not explain it to your friends or family because you barely understood it yourself. To the outside world, you may have looked like you were functioning, or perhaps you looked like you were battling depression. But deep down, you knew this was not a mood disorder. This was an existential eviction. It felt as though your mind was betraying you, as if the operating system of your soul was being forcibly uninstalled. If you recognize yourself in these words, stay with me. Because what I am about to reveal will change how you see your entire journey. You felt the terror of losing your mind, but in reality, you were losing something else. You were losing your illusions. There is a profound difference between a breakdown and a breakthrough. Yet in the heat of the fire, they feel identical. The isolation you felt was absolute. That might have been the cruelest part of the test. You were walking through a valley where no one could follow. The well-intentioned advice of others, just stay positive, this too shall pass, keep busy, felt not just empty, but offensive. It felt like trying to bandage a severed limb with a sticker. They were speaking the language of the surface, while you were drowning in the depths.
You were not dealing with a bad day. You were dealing with a total reorganization of your psyche. Your reality was being reconstructed from the subatomic level up. Therapy likely felt insufficient because you were not sick. You were not broken in the way a machine is broken. You were dissolving in the way a caterpillar dissolves inside the chrysalis. There is no language in our modern world for this experience because it is not a pathology, it is an initiation. And here is the first truth that will shake you. The collapse was engineered by your soul. It was not a punishment for your mistakes. It was a rescue mission for your essence. Your ego, that small protective manager of your personality, had built a life that was too small for your destiny.
If you had continued on that path, you would have suffocated. The psyche, in its infinite intelligence, decided to burn down the house of your false identity to save the inhabitant living inside it. Jung himself discovered this truth through his own terrifying descent, a period where he confronted visions and voices that nearly overwhelmed him.
The self, with a capital S, will mercilessly destroy the little self if that is what is required to make you whole. This process, this individuation, is a death.
And most people are too afraid to die while they are still alive. They choose the comfortable prison of the known over the terrifying vastness of the unknown. They choose to live a partial life, safe within the herd, rather than risk the wilderness of their own soul.
And there is no judgment in that choice. It is safer. But you did not have that luxury. Something within you had already crossed a threshold. You could no longer lie to yourself. You could no longer pretend that the mask you wore was your true face. This is the test you passed. The test was this: could you surrender to the darkness without knowing if the light would ever return? Could you let go of who you were before you knew who you would become? That willingness to sit in the fire, that exhausted surrender when you had no fight left, that was the key. That was the moment you separated yourself from the unconscious masses. If you are feeling the resonance of this truth in your bones, signal your presence by subscribing to this channel.
Not just as a viewer, but as a witness to your own transformation. Now, recall the precise moment the structure fell. It might have been a singular event, a betrayal, a loss, a failure. Or it might have been a slow, creeping realization that you were living a script written by someone else. You looked in the mirror one morning and saw a stranger. This is the death of the persona. The persona is necessary for a child. It is the social mask we wear to survive, to be loved, to fit in. But for the adult seeking truth, the persona becomes suffocating armor. For you, the armor did not just rust, it shattered. You fell through the cracks of your own identity. This is the terrifying gap between who you pretended to be and who you actually are.
Most people spend their entire lives frantically patching these cracks, desperate to maintain the performance. You stopped performing. You could not do it anymore. Your soul went on strike. This was not a failure of willpower. It was the triumph of your deeper intelligence. Your ego had been running on outdated software, survival mechanisms from childhood, fears inherited from your parents, societal conditioning that taught you to be small. The self finally said, "Enough." But here is what nobody tells you about what comes next, and this is crucial. During this time, you likely experienced dreams of intense vividness or coincidences that defied statistical probability. Symbols appeared in your waking life. This was your unconscious mind breaking the seal, trying to guide you when your conscious mind was blind. You were in the alchemical vessel.
The ancients spoke of turning lead into gold, but they were never talking about metal. They were talking about you. The lead is the heavy, burdened, unconscious self. The gold is the integrated, awakened spirit. But to get from lead to gold, there must be fire. You stayed in the fire, even when you wanted to quit. Even when you prayed for an easy way out, you stayed. You chose the agonizing truth over the comfortable lie. This is where the road forks. This is where most turn back. They rush into a new relationship to avoid the pain of the old one. They numb themselves with substances or distractions. They adopt a spiritual persona to bypass the dirty work of healing. But you faced the void. You stopped asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and started asking, "What is this trying to teach me?"
That shift in the question changed everything.
It moved you from victim to student. And what a brutal curriculum it was. You had to confront your shadow. Jung said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You had to look at the parts of yourself you had spent a lifetime hiding. Not just your flaws, but your complicity. You had to see where you had abandoned yourself to please others. You had to feel the rage you were never allowed to express as a child. You had to grieve the years you spent trying to be the good son, the perfect daughter, the reliable partner, at the cost of your own soul. And here is the secret that changes everything. You realized that much of your personality was a trauma response.
You were helpful because you feared rejection. You were successful because you feared unworthiness. You were quiet because you feared conflict. When the mask fell, you had to meet the raw, unpolished, and sometimes terrifying creature underneath. You had to reclaim your shadow. The shadow is not just a basement of monsters. It is also the treasure house of your gold. In that darkness, you found the creativity you had suppressed. You found the power you were afraid to wield. You found the boundaries you were too nice to set. Reclaiming this power is heavy work. It requires you to admit that you have capacity for malevolence, for selfishness, for destruction. And by owning that capacity, you become dangerous. Not in a way that harms others, but in a way that protects your soul.
You become peaceful, not because you are weak, but because you are dangerous and you choose to be peaceful. That is the difference between a victim and a warrior. During those long nights of the soul, you learned the difference between loneliness and solitude. At first, the silence was deafening. You felt abandoned by the world. Friends fell away. The people who loved your mask could not understand your face. They called you distant. They called you selfish. But you were not pulling away from them. You were pulling back into yourself. You were in the womb of the chrysalis, and a dissolving caterpillar cannot attend dinner parties. You needed that silence. You needed to hear your own voice above the roar of the collective. In that sacred solitude, you learned to discern the difference between your intuition and your fear. You learned that you are enough, not as a mantra, but as a survival fact. You survived the death of your ego, and you were still there. The witness remained. That part of you that watched the collapse, that watched the grief, that watched the terror. That part is eternal. That is the self. You touched the indestructible core of your being. This journey has changed your eyes. You see differently now because you have stripped away your own masks. You can see through the masks of others. You have become a lie detector. You can walk into a room and sense the unspoken dynamics, the hidden agendas, the suppressed emotions. It is not judgment. It is simply clarity. You see the shadow in others because you are intimate with your own. You no longer need people to be perfect because you know how heavy the burden of perfection is. But you also no longer tolerate deception. You crave the real. You have lost your taste for small talk, for superficial connections, for relationships that are based on mutual pretense. You have become what Jung called the wounded healer. Your wound is your credential. You do not help others because you have read it in a book.
You help others simply by your presence, because you have been to the underworld and you found the way back. When people are around you, they feel a strange permission to be real. They drop their defenses. They tell you their secrets. They feel safe because your demons have been tamed, and so yours do not trigger theirs.
This presence you carry is not something you do. It is something you are. It is the weight of your integration. You are no longer fragmented, fighting a civil war inside your own head. You are whole, and wholeness is magnetic. Wholeness is healing. You have likely noticed that animals and children respond to you differently now. They sense the congruence. They sense that the person on the outside matches the person on the inside. However, this new state comes with a new set of challenges. You may feel like an alien in a world that is still asleep. You look at the games people play, the status seeking, the drama, the constant need for validation, and it looks like a theater production you are no longer cast in. You might feel a profound sense of grief for the world, seeing how much suffering is caused by blindness.
But you also know that you cannot wake someone who is pretending to be asleep. You can only shine your light and let them open their eyes when they are ready. Your relationship with time has shifted. The frantic urgency of the ego, the need to make it happen right now, has been replaced by a deep trust in the timing of the self. You know that you cannot force the flower to open. You know that winter is as necessary as spring. You have surrendered to the rhythm of life rather than trying to conduct it. Now we must look at what happens when you return to the village, and this is where it gets real. You have survived the wilderness, but you are no longer the person who left.
You have likely discovered that you can no longer tolerate surface-level interactions. The small talk that once filled your days now feels draining, almost physically uncomfortable. This is not arrogance. It is a mismatch of vibration. You have been to the depths, and you can no longer pretend to swim in the shallows. You have had to learn the difficult art of setting boundaries without guilt. You realize that some people in your life were attached to your lack of boundaries, attached to your willingness to be used, attached to the version of you that stayed small to make them feel big. When you stopped playing that role, the dynamic collapsed. You had to let them go. You had to accept that some relationships are seasonal, and the winter has come for them.
This required a courage that most never develop. The courage to disappoint others, to be true to yourself. But as you cleared the dead wood from the forest of your life, something miraculous began to happen. You created space. And in that space, new connections have started to emerge. You are beginning to attract people who meet you at your new depth. People who are not afraid of their own shadows, and therefore are not afraid of yours. If you are looking for that tribe of people who have also walked through the fire, join this community by subscribing. You are connecting with a frequency of truth that is rare in this world. This shift has also bled into your work, your career, your sense of purpose. You can no longer perform work that feels soulless.
Your body rebels against it. The paycheck is no longer enough to justify the betrayal of your time. You have stopped asking, "What will make me successful?" and started asking, "What feels true?" This might have led to a radical career change, or simply a radical change in how you approach your work.
You are no longer driven by the hungry ghost of the ego seeking validation and status. You are driven by the self seeking expression and contribution. You work with a different quality now, less frantic, more focused. You are not trying to prove your worth. You are expressing your essence. You have developed the capacity to hold the tension of opposites. You can be alone without being lonely. You can feel deep sorrow for the state of the world, while simultaneously holding deep joy for the privilege of being alive.
You can observe chaos without becoming chaotic. This is psychological maturity. This is the gold. You have acquired a quiet authority. It is not the loud posturing confidence of the insecure. It is the grounded, silent power of the mountain. You do not need to announce your presence. You do not need to demand respect. You simply are. When you speak from a place of deep knowing, and people listen, even if they do not understand why. You have become a tuning fork. When you walk into a room, your stability stabilizes others. Your clarity clarifies the situation. This is the hidden gift of your suffering. Your presence has become medicine. Jung said that the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being.
You are that light. By saving yourself, you have done a service to the collective. Every time you choose authenticity over conformity, you heal a fracture in the collective unconscious. Every time you break a generational curse in your own family line, you liberate those who come after you. You think your journey was personal, but it was transpersonal. You were cleaning the stream for everyone downstream. You now possess a different kind of perception. You notice the synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that act as winks from the universe, confirming you are on the right path. You trust your intuition implicitly because it has been forged in the fire. You know things before you are told. You read energy better than you read words. You have stopped fighting the current of life and learned to navigate the river.
This is the state of effortless action, where you move with the grain of the universe rather than against it. Living this way is not always easy. It requires constant vigilance. The world will try to pull you back into sleep. The world is designed to keep you distracted, fearful, and consumerist. But you have seen behind the curtain. You know that the things they sell you, the fame, the accumulation of objects, the superficial beauty, are toys for children. You are an adult of the soul now. You crave meaning, you crave beauty, you crave truth. There is a strange, paradoxical gratitude that settles in at this stage. You look back at the darkest nights, the moments you lay on the floor crying, the moments you thought you were losing your mind, and you realize it was all necessary.
You would not wish that pain on your worst enemy. And yet you would not trade who you have become for anything. You have been broken open. Yes, but that is how the light gets in. You are the kintsugi vessel, the pottery broken and repaired with gold lacquer, more beautiful and valuable for having been broken. You have passed the test. You did not pass it by being perfect. You passed it by being willing. Willing to die to your old self, to stand in the unknown, to feel the things you were afraid to feel. And now you are living proof that transformation is real. So stand tall, not with pride, but with dignity. You are a survivor of the greatest war, the war for your own soul.
You won. The rest of your life is the reward. It is yours to design, to savor, to offer as a gift to the world. As we close this chapter, I want to ask something of you. In the comments below, write a single sentence describing the most important thing you discovered about yourself in the darkness. Let your testimony be a light for those who are still in the fire, seeking hope. Let them see that there is another side. And if you are ready to continue this work, to learn how to maintain this high-functioning state of authenticity in a low-vibration world, make sure you subscribe for the next transmission. You have earned your name. You have earned your life. Now go and live it.